Hello, everyone, and welcome to HBCU Highlights, where we highlight, spotlight, and showcase HBCU excellence. And today we hit a home run, and you're gonna laugh when you figure out why I said we hit a home run. It's because we are interviewing our Spelman sister, our class of '98 classmate from Spelman College, Nichol Whiteman. And ladies and gentlemen, she is the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation. So Nichol, thank you so much for being here today. We are excited to spotlight you. And I want to know, why did you choose to go to Spelman College?
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with both you and Ashley. Just really glad you guys are doing this. This is very exciting. My Spelman story is very ironic. It was not one of the stories that you often hear of that little girl who was 5 years old, whose great grandmother went to Spelman or mom went to Spelman, and she knew she was always going there. I actually grew up in New York City. I went to high school in Connecticut. I went to a private boarding school where I was the only the only Black female on campus all 4 years in my class at Canterbury School in New Milford, Connecticut. A place I had never heard of before. But I had received a scholarship in 8th grade recommended to me by my 8th grade counselor, who essentially told my parents at the time that, because of my academic success and also because of the success I had in playing soccer at the time, that this would probably be a great school for me about 2 hours outside of New York City. So I was really excited. Who was excited at the age of 14 to leave home like it was college? Me. But I was really excited and took that opportunity to go to New Milford, Connecticut. And always thought I would be going to a predominantly white college or university, and potentially an Ivy League, which was kind of the path of most of the students who went to Canterbury and where folks went to school. And of course, there was zero knowledge of historically Black colleges and universities because I was the only one in my class. And so my parents actually immigrated from the small island nation of Jamaica. And so I am the first generation college graduate in my family. And so I didn't even have a college person to say, oh, my mom went here, my dad went here, this is what I think I'm gonna do, here's what I think I might whatever, right? So in high school, I looked to my college counselor really to suggest schools, which were the schools that were being suggested to all of the other boys and girls around me at Canterbury. I went to Emory in Atlanta to visit with my mom, and it was actually one of my safety schools. I kind of already knew where I was going to go to school. I had gotten some early acceptances earlier on, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to check out these safety schools. I went to visit Emory, and while we were in Atlanta, a friend of my mom said, you guys have to go visit Spelman. To be totally honest, at the time, she and I had no idea what Spelman was. And so I stepped on the campus, and you ladies know it best. It was like the most glorious aha moment I had ever experienced. I had never seen that many beautiful Black women who just exude excellence without even opening their mouths, just walking the campus. And so we did our tour and we went through the entire experience. And I basically went back to New York from Atlanta and told my dad that I was going to Spelman College. And he was like, no, you're not, because you have money and acceptances to go elsewhere. And so that began that journey. But the Spelman story was very unique for me. I did not have a family member who had previously gone, and I honestly had no knowledge of the school before I actually stepped on the campus.
Wow, Nichol, your experience is very similar to mine. I know the school that I went to, I was one of just a few African-American students that were there. No one was really encouraging or pushing me to go to an HBCU. That's why it's so important for us to spotlight people like you with these interviews, so people know how awesome HBCUs are and the type of pedigree, that comes out of these schools.
Yes.
So talk to us about your experience at Spelman and how that experience shaped you into the woman you are today.
Well, yeah. So interestingly enough, continuing upon my story, I actually was able to attend because I received 2 scholarships, a UNCF scholarship, as well as a Jackie Robinson Foundation scholarship. And that was still not even enough to cover me every year for the 4 years. And so I decided to major in economics and minor in management and organization. But I worked throughout the entire 4 years of school, and not just a work study job, but I always had a work study job and 1 or 2 additional jobs off campus. So ironically, there's a lot of people in my class who honestly I did not interact with because I was very busy all 4 years between carrying the course load, working in, I did my work study in the financial aid office. I wanted to be really close to the money. And then I also worked off campus in various jobs. But even with all of that, my experience was amazing. People ask me all the time, did you pledge, whether it be AKA or Delta? I actually didn't pledge because for me, Spelman itself was a sorority. It was a group of women and an experience I had never experienced before, as I mentioned. And so for me, I just wanted it to be holistic. Like that whole thing for me was just one big like girl gang. And I was happy to be a part of it. The reality is I feel like it's what made me whole. I didn't realize till I got to Spelman that I was missing so much, right? I had not gone to schools where I was learning about African-American history, not just from a textbook, but from your roommate who's from North Carolina, or your roommate who's from Alabama, or the girl who sits in class with you who's from Tennessee, or that girl who's from LA. I would have never known anything about LA. But basically, I felt like to know that there are so many beautiful women and our brothers across the street at Morehouse, who all are striving for this amazing excellence, right? You come from places where you were like top of your class, but we were all moving in that direction of just wanting to be the best. Spelman kind of puts that cap on you that says you can be the best. You are the best. Your skin is beautiful. Because of your skin, you can be so many amazing things. And so I tell people all the time, it's where I gained the utmost confidence, which I know is what I use today to lead.
Wow. You have an incredible story, and I'm so glad that we are spotlighting your story. And I just want to take you back to 8th grade when you decided to leave home at 14 to go away to this boarding school, because it's very rare for a young Black woman to attend boarding school, first of all, and then to be the only Black at the school and go from that to being immersed around predominantly, primarily African-American women and men in the Atlanta University Center. Was there any culture shock for you, or did you have to adjust or adapt in any way that you felt, would have been different from someone that didn't have that experience that you had at that boarding school?
Yeah, definitely adapted. I adapted for 2 reasons. One, because my family was from Jamaica. And while I am forever reminded of who I am and was always reminded of who I am by my parents, I laugh and I tell people all the time, I thought I was born in Jamaica until I was about 16 years old, because we were immersed in our culture. We ate Jamaican food. We went to Jamaica once or twice every year. My family, in terms of my dad's brothers and sisters and my cousins, were very close. My parents, again, I was first generation American. And so I was immersed in the West Indian culture. And then at the same time, when you say then I was immersed in this predominantly white American culture. When I got to Spelman, there was a culture shock. And it was interesting because I always felt like, oh, should I know that? Oh, should I know that? But I was learning so much freshman year about the African-American experience, right? Sounds crazy, but I was, especially coming from New York, where honestly, like you can feel like you're in little Caribbean, West Indian, like New York. It's very, of the islands, depending on what circles you run into as well. So when it came to Spelman, I always tell this funny story about how freshman year, I walked into the cafeteria and I was with my roommate, and everybody was just going through the line and they were grabbing their food. And I started asking questions about what was that? And those cafeteria ladies were looking at me like, why is she asking, what is that? I was so embarrassed. I never did that again. I just asked my roommates and kind of went about my business. But there were even foods that I had never had before, but yet they were so similar to Jamaican, right? Like we eat something called callaloo. Okay, collard greens, same difference, different green, cooked a little bit different, but I had not had collard greens before I got to Spelman, frankly, but I had callaloo.
You may not have even had fried okra either before you got to Spelman.
I sure had not. Yep, you are right, but I love it to this day.
Me and you both, girl. I was taking chunks of that fried okra every other day, however often they cooked it. But I love me some fried okra. Haven't had it in a while. So Nichol, you know, you had this wonderful experience, although, you know, quite a learning curve for you and many of us coming into Spelman. But when you walked through that arch and you graduated and you had, I'm sure, several job offers. Can you talk to us about that journey, getting to where you are today as the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation?
Yeah, I remember on graduation day just crying, y'all. I couldn't talk to people. I almost like don't remember most of it because I think I cried the whole day because it was such a massive accomplishment. It was so, I did it for so many reasons, right? Like speaking of how I got there and just thinking about the economics major that I, for so many, at so many different opportunities was like, I am changing this. What was I thinking? The minor in management and organization. I did a internship with an investment bank every summer. So even the summer that the Olympics were in Atlanta, I stayed in Atlanta and worked for Wachovia, but every other summer I went to New York. But it was a trial. It was a lot. My parents divorced, basically dropped me at Spelman, and essentially told me before they left me that we're getting divorced. So my experience for those 4 years was rough for that purpose. And I have younger brothers and sisters and one who's older. So it was like we were all going through that in very different places. And I had to augment the scholarships with the financial aid and the work study and other jobs just to kind of make it through. And at the time, honestly, just because of what my parents were even going through, they were not able to help me. And so it was a lot. There was a overflow of independence, even though I had received that level of independence going to this boarding school at the age of 14. It was a different level of independence. There was no hopping on the Metro North and ending up back at home in 2 hours door to door. This was like, you're going to drive 13 hours if you want to go back to New York, you know, for whatever comfort or solace you think you need from your parents or family. So that 4 years was an experience, but again, I feel like it's what made me, right? It like gave me this backbone to just be like, oh, you could get through this, you can get through this, you could get through this, you can get through anything. So graduation was just, I was overwhelmed, just, I cried like the whole day, didn't know how to feel, but knew I just felt like I had conquered the world. Like, this is it. And oh my gosh, I had graduated from college and nobody in my family, my immediate family, has had this opportunity. What a feeling, what a cross I carry now, you know, like that was very much in my mind as well. But I knew that early on, I did the econ major because I wanted to go into investment banking. I wanted to go back to New York and work on Wall Street. Like, that's what you do, right? And the schools came to recruit at Spelman. And to Ashley's point, I had offers. I was very lucky to have done the summer associate and internship positions. And I took that job with JP Morgan Chase and was like, yep, this is where I'm going, back to New York, dream realized, let's do this.
Well, so you realized that dream, and what a dream, and what big shoulders and, you know, footprints that you're leaving, just first of all amongst your family members. So to be the first in your entire family to go to college, you're a role model for your siblings. And then to now be the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation. So let's talk about that. So do you have to know about baseball? Do you have to, I mean, obviously you know about money, but it's one of those roles that when you open up a magazine and you see your face as the CEO, I was that young woman that would see people in the magazine just like you and say, how did she get to that role? So tell us exactly, how did you go from investment banking, from being on Wall Street, to the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation? And do you apply those skills at all? Did you transfer any of those skills? Just tell me exactly from A to Z in a few minutes how you did it.
So interestingly enough, I thought that the dream was realized with the investment management position back in New York, in the Big Apple. This is the finance thing. This is what I've been working for. And I would say after about a year, I realized that that was not what was going to make me happy. I was not thrilled going to work every day, I wasn't excited about what I was doing. I was excited about being in New York and about the network that existed at Post School, but the job was not, it wasn't moving me. And so my first year out of college was actually a pretty hard one professionally, because I questioned what I was doing every single day. And I was kind of rolling with it because my friends were rolling with it, whether they worked where I did or at other investment banks or consulting firms. This is what you do, right? This is what you do. But I quickly, thankfully, came to realize that that was not what I loved. That was not what I loved. And I had a roommate who had a friend who worked in the publishing space. He worked for Essence Magazine, and a marketing job became available. And I just said, you know, I'm going to go interview for this job. And she was like, I really think you should. You just never know. I went on an interview with the vice president of marketing for Essence Magazine, and she hired me. She hired me on the spot. She told me the job was mine. She's a mentor of mine to this day. Love Karen Thomas to death. And she said she hired me because she said I came in the door with the skills and the confidence, and the assets that showed her that I was going to be able to do the job no matter what the job was. And so I started out in publishing, and I worked in the marketing and the advertising and the sponsorship space over about 6 years with Essence Magazine and then with Black Enterprise Magazine. And while I was with Black Enterprise Magazine, I had the opportunity to relocate to LA. I had just met my husband. I told him I was moving to LA. He asked me to marry him and said, I'm moving to LA too. And so that's how that happened. It was a very short period of time. A lot of transition had happened in my life. This was all occurring at the time when 9/11 happened. And so I was also living by coastal at the time, which was pretty interesting. And at that point, I also knew I wanted to be in LA. And so I was here working for Black Enterprise Magazine, you know, loving what I did. And I went to a conference in Arizona, and I met the president and CEO of the Jackie Robinson Foundation. And she said to me, you know, we're opening an office in LA to supplement the headquarters in New York City. You having had been a scholarship recipient, and really understanding our foundation and what it does for, you know, young minority children, how about you come help us open up this office? And I thought to myself, I had never thought about nonprofit management. I didn't study that. You know, am I going to be broke? Because here I was on the path to let's do investments, let's do marketing, let's do advertising. And so I ended up like thinking about it over about a 6-month period. And finally, something just called me and pushed me to say, this is what you need to do. And I took the job, and I became the Western Region Officer for the Jackie Robinson Foundation, basically covering everything from the St. Louis and West, essentially, which meant that I met all of the folks who worked for Major League Baseball teams and a lot of corporations outside of baseball at the time, who we got to sponsor scholarships for students, as well as students who we were recruiting from all of those states. And so I worked on the program side, I worked on the fundraising side. I tell people all the time, I feel like I got a doctoral degree in nonprofit management working for the Jackie Robinson Foundation. I got really close to the family, and so Rachel and Sharon became extremely dear to me, as they are today. And that was sort of my segue into the semi-baseball world, even though the scholarship is an education scholarship for any child of any major who really wants the money, but also wants the leadership and development component and the network that the scholarship provides to you. And so I was with the Jackie Robinson Foundation for about 6 years. A recruiter called me. I went to work for a public school reform organization called LA's Promise here in LA, which was really nice because with Jackie Robinson Foundation, I traveled a lot. I was on planes 2 or 3 times a week to different cities. It was nice to be in LA. It was nice to understand the Los Angeles Unified School District. I had had my first son by that time. And so, you know, being home a little bit more and understanding all of that made a whole lot of sense. And then I went to work for College Summit, which is a college access organization based out of DC, but I was the executive director of the San Francisco office and the LA office. And I had only been there for less than a year when I was helping the Dodgers, the new ownership group, I would say voluntarily consulting on some events that I had started when I was at the Jackie Robinson Foundation that they were thinking about picking up. And 2 executives in a meeting said to me, why haven't you applied to be the executive director of our foundation? And I was very honest and said, I didn't know you were hiring someone to be your executive director. I don't know what the Dodgers Foundation does. I'm not really sure like what your vision and your mission is. I remember going out into the parking lot that day because they said to me, hey, you know what? We are at the point where we were about to offer someone the job. We're relocating this woman from another state, but we really think that you should throw your head in this whole search period. I went to the parking lot. I called my husband. I told my husband, these people must be like totally kidding me. This must be a joke. This is like really funny. Ha ha ha. And he was like, they are not joking. I had an evening event to go to. I went to the dinner and came home. It was like 11 o'clock. And my husband was like, didn't they ask you to send their resume to them tonight? And I was like, they sure did. He's like, so we're going to do that right now. And I was like, my resume is not even updated. We updated it. I hit send. I woke up the next morning and I had an email from the recruiter who asked me to have breakfast. I went to have breakfast with her. I spent the next maybe 14 to 20 days interviewing with our ownership, Mark Walter, with Magic Johnson. It was pretty intense. I was overwhelmed. I was like, what is happening right now? But I accepted that moment, accepted that interview process, had to tell College Summit I was moving on. They were all like, we would have moved on too. Like, this is a great opportunity. And for the first time, I said I had gotten my dream job and really meant it. This was the mature, everything melted in one place, Nichol. So when you say, how did the JP Morgan piece, it's like, I'm running a small business. The Dodgers Foundation is a standalone 501c3. We are obviously operating in the grandeur of the big, big brand that is the Dodgers. But the opportunity to also help so many kids, who feel like I felt at the ages where they are in life, it's huge. I get paid to give back to help vulnerable communities. But I get to use that business savvy, that marketing savvy, that advertising savvy, and all that I've took with me along the way. And it all really does melt here. It melts right here.
Wow, Nichol, you are a boss. Have always been a boss. And I'm listening to you and I'm just grabbing all these nuggets that you're sharing. And I'm just thinking to myself, none of this just happened by chance, girl. You didn't get lucky. This was your destiny. You are confident, you're brilliant, you're smart. And so many people see that in you and you're like, really, what? You want me to show up when? And you're making it happen. What would you tell that 17-year-old Nichol, all that you know now, what would you turn around and tell her when you were starting Spelman years ago? What would you share with her, knowing what you know now?
I would tell her, one, to continue to keep working as hard as I worked. And sometimes you got to put your head down and do the work because you just never know who's watching. And that's where I believe all my successes come from, right? Just be humble, put your head down and do the work, and you will get what is due to you. I would also tell myself to take care of myself. I think that along the way, you can work so hard that you forget about that inner being, that emotional person, that spiritual person. That's all a part of you. That's going to be just as important to that success when you reach, those pivotal points. And so what I would tell myself, then is, yes, continue to work hard, put your head down, success will come. But also make sure you take care of yourself along the way, because that is just as important. It really is.
Well, thank you for those words of wisdom. You, as Ashley just said, have dropped so much knowledge, and there's so many people watching this who aspire to be like you. And I'm just wondering, who was your role model when you were a teenager, if you had to choose one?
So I feel like I definitely have to defer to my parents. I say my parents because they worked so hard. When I think about my dad, and he was in a situation where, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so there's 5 of us in total. My dad would go to work on a regular sort of 8 to 4. He would come home, he would change, he would go back to work and do an evening job. In the middle of all of that, he still cooked. He still figured out how to be there for us. We didn't feel like he was absent. He was like Superman. And I always felt like, wow, this idea of you can sort of have it all if you work really hard, that was pushed into me by my parents. Their desire and motivation to come to this country for a better life for the children that they didn't yet have at the time, but they knew that part was going to be important. Their foreshadowing, their vision, really my parents. There's a lot of amazing characters in the world who motivate me today for sure. Amazing personalities who motivate me today for sure. And folks who I felt the power from as I was growing up, like a Jackie Robinson. Today, I am enamored with Melody Hobson like no other. I hang on her every word. But my parents were my ultimate role model in terms of, you can do this, because I saw them do it. It was that whole leading by example.
Great. Now, you are clearly giving back as just in your role as CEO of the Dodgers Foundation. Is there any unique projects or anything that you've been a part of since you started your new role, where you can say, hey, that happened under my tenure as CEO of the Dodger Foundations, in terms of what we've been able to give back or contribute to the community?
Yeah, you know what? We started a program that we call Dodgers RBI that began, the RBI acronym is Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities, in 2014, a couple months after I had came on board. And the reality is, it's probably so thrilling for me, because there are 11,000 boys and girls who participate in this youth development program throughout Los Angeles in some of the most challenging communities. And sometimes, you know, I just literally go to the grocery store and a family taps me on the shoulder and talks about that college experience that we were able to give them, whether it be a tour or a workshop or the fitness clinic, or my son would have never played baseball and softball because of the expense that comes with the sport if it wasn't for you and your foundation. The families have ignited me in a way that is like, wow. Being able to produce something that has come to where it is over the last 6 years, with all of these families across all of these miles who are getting so many resources from us, that are education resources, health resources, and the opportunity to engage in sport, which is so important for a child's life because of the social emotional lessons and the teamwork aspect that sport really does teach a human being. It's thrilling for me. It's a base that excites me to do what I do every single day. I want to see kids matriculate throughout our program. I want to see families take pride in themselves and in their children and what they do because of what we're able to provide. There's a lot of struggling communities in the country. There's a lot of struggling communities right here in LA. And it's just rewarding to have created something that they can latch onto and that they feel a part of. It's really special.
Well, congratulations, Nichol, on just realizing your dream and having a career that pays it forward 24/7. I mean, to actually get a scholarship from an organization that hires you, you really went full circle. And sounds like you had your family, including your parents, to push and encourage you. But not only that, your husband to basically push you to say, hey, you know, they're not joking. Let's apply. Let's see what's going to happen. And now you have your own family. So tell us more about your own family with your children. And are you pushing them to play sports, or do you have a future Dodgers players on your hand, or are we looking at a CEO?
Probably all of the above. I have 2 beautiful boys and a half daughter. And so my daughter is actually the oldest. And I say she was my first child, my first peek into like what motherhood would even be. She'll be a sophomore in college at Guilford College in North Carolina this coming fall. My first son will be 17 in September. He'll be a junior this fall. I know, insane, crazy, crazy, crazy. My last son is 11, and he would have been experiencing a 5th grade graduation in the next couple of weeks, but obviously given where we are, he is, they're doing it in a creative way, but he'll be in middle school in the fall, and so he'll be in 6th grade. My children are quite independent because they have had to be, and I think that has pushed them and motivated them to try so many different things. So my boys do play sports. And they have literally what Tim and I said was, when they were of age for everything, we would take them out and we would see what stuck. The funny joke is that everything stuck. So they wanted to play everything. They never backed down from anything. And so we have had to sort of temper them in terms of, oh, you can't play 6 sports a year. You kind of need to do this, especially for my son, TJ, who's in high school. He's a baseball player as well as a basketball player. And that's a tough thing, just to play 2 sports in high school. It really is tough. My young one continues to play 3 sports. You know, he's a baseball player, he's a basketball player, he's a soccer player, and he also plays amateur golf with my husband. So he's busy all the time. Our schedule is pretty crazy. They have both played instruments. They have both been in leadership programs. Some of that, they don't have a choice. You know, things come my way and I'm like, oh, you should do this. And they always say, oh, that means that you're saying we have to do this. But I feel like I've given them so many different things to try, and I like to see what sticks. I want to be that parent who's forcing you to do anything, or who's wasting dollars per se for something that you just didn't want to do, right? We've seen that happen one too many times. And right now it's crazy to think that, you know, in 2 years we'll have another in college, which is interesting because he's ready to go, ready to, you know, just excited to see the young man that he's maturing into. My 11-year-old ironically wants to go to a private boarding school not far from here in Santa Barbara. And so he's heard me talk a lot about Canterbury over the last couple of years because I've done a lot of speaking engagements. And so definitely supporting that, and we'll see where that goes. But they're amazing young men. I always say they get on my nerves all the time, but they really are amazing young men. And I'm just excited to see kind of where they go next. But yeah, really special children.
Wow, sounds like you'll be an empty nester soon. Soon, that's pretty awesome. But Nichol, look, if you are breathing, right, and you're watching this show or that show, you might see you know, maybe on, I don't know, a commercial speaking about what you're doing, or you're being highlighted with the Dodgers. I think even the New York Times has recently released some more information about you and the great things that you're doing. But for those of us that are focused and intentionally looking for you, where can we find you social media wise, as far as your foundation? Where should we go?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter at Nichol Whiteman, Nichol. I have that unique first spelling of my name. Also, the work of the Dodgers Foundation is at Dodgers Foundation on Facebook or on Instagram, and then we're at Dodgers FDN on Twitter. We're very active in posting all of the work that we do, and obviously as the CEO, you see my face pretty often in the work that we do. So you'll catch me in those 2 places. I'm on Instagram as NTMW, and also on Facebook as Nichol Mackenzie Whiteman as well.
Well, Nichol, you are so unique and you are so amazing. And Ashley and I would like to thank you so much for taking the time out to tell your story. And you have such an inspiring story. And I guarantee that there is some young teenager watching this who now is asking her mother about boarding school, or asking her mother about Spelman, and looking at a sports team and saying, hey, I can be like Nichol. So thank you so much for sharing your story. We're so excited to have you here today because we know you're busy. You're a wife, you're a mother, and you are the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation. So now all of you see why I said we hit a home run with this interview. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for watching.